I'm Ted Leverette. I'm broadcasting from partneroncall.com. I'm the original business buyer advocate. And I've been doing this for about 30 years. I've been helping people find and buy the right businesses the right way. Today, we're going to discuss what's happening and what might happen for people wanting to buy and sell small and mid-sized businesses in the context of our global pandemic and the concurrent financial crisis. We've got people attending this conference from all over the world, from just about any kind of background that you could imagine: searchers, buyers, advisors, etc., even some owners and sellers and brokers. Really what we're going to try to do is probe for the truth about a company's situation. That's what we're doing today. And we need to be able to do it quickly. Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of time and you're going to be listening to a lot of BS stories from owners, brokers, and others. Next Wednesday, for those of you just tuned in, we're going to talk about how to exploit the situation. Right now, we want to know how to get to the truth. Due diligence questions to detect risk and opportunity during the crises. The rules of the game have changed. How the small businesses are operating, definitely how they're valued and financed. Oh, and how about how they're sold to buyers, if they can be sold. Oh, and that's why the business brokers, you're probably noticing, are adapting how they relate to sellers. And it's why we on the buy side, we're rewriting our playbooks. We're going to need to abide by the new rules, and it could be for a couple of years, not a couple of weeks or months like our governments are telling us. Procrastination is going to cost us. We need to get out there. Unnecessarily sitting on the sidelines is not smart. You know, in the old days, which were, a few months ago, we saw deal makers focusing on the operational aspects of the businesses and how those operations affected the bottom line. Well, that's yesterday. Nowadays, we're looking first to the value drivers. What needs to be done? What has been done? What can we do to increase the profitability, the saleability, and the value of the businesses? And guess what? From our view, the view of the investors and the business buyers, we buyers, we want to ensure we're getting what we pay for. Sellers don't want to make promises they can't keep, especially if the buyers have reliable recourse against sellers. One more time, you're going to hear me. You need to have the right kind of lawyer on your team up front before you hit the playing field. Now let's think a little bit about the value drivers. Listen to this. I'm going to read a paragraph and then I'll tell you where I got it. I wish I would have written it, but this is vital. This is why we're not focusing on the operational stuff, at least up front. Look at this like we're peeling an onion. This is the first layer. Here goes. Value due diligence examines all the performance levers and identifies the most important levers. Levers such as the top line and margin growth, cost reductions and efficiencies, cash flow fortification. That's a good word, fortification of cash flow, and performance enabling factors. This kind of due diligence tests the business plans. It tests the performance, and it's looking for the risks. It enables us to rapidly identify and prioritize critical, strategic, and operational value drivers. It enables us this view to assess their potential contribution and to define implementation plans for us. It's going to review the full economic potential of an asset. I know that sounds like theory. If you listen to this again, listen to it again. I wish I could take credit for what I just said. It comes from somebody by the name of Oliver Wyman, and he wrote an article called Value Due Diligence. But you'll get the point as we proceed. As we get into the question list, what I just read to you, that so-called theory, is going to slap right into you. Keep in mind that today, one more time, we're not emphasizing operational due diligence. So I don't want to hear anything about how to analyze the financial statement. That's not important right now. What's important is that the business is going to be in business in 2 months, 6 months, in a year. And if you buy them, what's it going to be like to be holding it? You know, this is uncertain, very uncertain. And that's why it's a good idea for us to verify everything we see and hear. That means you verify what you see and hear from me. I'm giving you the best of my knowledge. But you know what? This stuff is changing daily. And what I said last week, I might change my mind today and probably tomorrow. So you got to do your own research. And by the way, test your communications on limited audiences before you roll out what you're going to do. So in other words, we're getting to the questions in just a minute or two. When you pop those questions, don't pop them to every broker and seller. Don't make it a written document you hand. Roll it out gently to a few people to see how it plays and then adjust. So guess what? Searching, well, it can make sense, but only carefully. And guess what? Searchers should not waste time on undoable deals. We're going to be in these questions in a moment. These are the go and no-go questions. This is where you find out before you ask any questions about operations whether you're looking at a doable deal. And get the heck out of there if you're talking to unreasonable or ill-prepared brokers or sellers. We don't have time for them. And guess what? Brokers and sellers listening right now, you should be shunning the unreasonable or the ill-prepared searchers. Don't waste your time on those people. This is not a good time to wing it. Okay, so we're talking about the fear in the marketplace. It's going to last for a long time. So even when your government tells you it's over, buyers are scared, lenders are scared, sellers are scared. Brokers want to sell their listings. But not for everybody. Those of us who know more are going to do better. And that's what we're covering today. Let's do a little bit more on the downside so you see what's happening right now. Buyers are aborting or deferring deals. Owners are afraid of trying to sell their business and failing at it because they're going to have to explain that later. Everyone's afraid of mistakes. The time on market is going to rise, except for the best of the best opportunities. Searchers, you're not going to be permitted to dither on the best offerings. Sellers are expected to finance more of the buyer's purchase, and I'm delighted to hear brokers telling sellers that. Lending terms for acquisition financing and working capital, well, good luck trying to find them. And if you do find them, the terms are not going to be what you used to get. They're going to be a lot more restrictive. Investors, they're not going to be eager to fund inexperienced searchers. I mean, I have to laugh at all these search funders out there who are totally inexperienced. You know, they have MBAs, and they're trying to get investors to fund them when they've never owned a business, run a business. Give me a break. Sellers, by the way, sellers that are holding back right now, they're going to be seeing increasing competition from two kinds of owners. The ones that absolutely have to sell now, it's their only hope of getting out with anything, or the owners that are going to start coming into the marketplace as it becomes less risky. And that could be in the next few weeks. Hey, guess what? We buyers, we're going to love this. It's time for sellers and buyers to rethink. Is now the optimum time to try to sell or buy? And the big question is, why? Why do you think that? Maybe we could talk about that in the discussion period in a little while. And this is why I'm crafting a whole new way for searchers and buyers to evaluate business opportunities. And you're going to preview some of it here. Right now, I'm working for a couple of searchers who just haven't been getting very good results. And we're scrutinizing their marketing plan, their criteria, blah, blah, blah. And what I did 2 months ago, we're reworking. Today, you're going to hear quite a bit of it right now, and you're not paying for it, other than with your time. Sellers and buyers and their advisors, you're going to have to rethink. You're going to have to adjust your expectations. You're going to have to adjust your timetables. You know, we can do due diligence. We have electronic meetings just like this. And there are virtual data rooms, video conferences, all kinds of things we can do to move deals along. So there's no excuse not to do deal making. Here's a real big tip though. Remember that I'm working for searchers and buyers. I know I have a larger audience here, but you might as well see how we think, because these are the savvy people. Believe me, the people who tune into my show, if they're reading my books, they're following what I'm saying, and I'm listening to them, we know what in the hell we're doing. So what exactly must the company do to renew itself, to transform itself, to return to profitability, or to take the company to its next level of performance? That's the big question. And for you searchers and buyers, are you certain, are you positive you're the person who can profitably manage the transaction if you make the deal and then run the company? If not, get the hell out of there. Too risky. Guess what you're going to see? I'm seeing it every day. Laughable on LinkedIn in the post. I mean, it's just like I ought to do a lot more of the laughing out loud, but I don't want to get reported for being such a jerk. Don't confuse me with the facts. That's the sentiment of so many people on the buy-sell playing field. They just don't want to hear it. You know, we got to be thinking about the attitudes, the perceptions, the beliefs. We got to be thinking about the influencers, those people who are influencing us. I'm talking about the effect on business brokers, on owners, on sellers, on searchers, buyers, landlords, everybody. These influences are affecting what we say, what we do, how we think, how we act. And guess who's also wrecking it for us? The media and our government. This is a time for thinking. I want to talk a little bit about scope. Give me about 3 minutes. Then we're going to cut into 25 questions. There's the scope. It's somewhat in the order of what's important right now. Everything revolves around this pandemic. But guess what? Lurking behind it is that financial system collapse we have. And now we got the economic situation. Legal, big. We're going to talk about that later. You'll hear it in the questions. HR. Some people are not paying enough attention. And how about customer orientation? You know, how well are we doing with the customers? And of course, there's the commercial due diligence and the questions and the environmental. Now, why did I single out HR? Well, guess what? It's the performance of the employees that can spell the difference between failure and success, between mediocrity and unbeatable, sustainable, competitive advantages. And that's why I encourage searchers and buyers and owners to assess the employees and the other stakeholders. What's their commitment to win? What is their commitment to do whatever it takes to sustain superiority? That's what's going to take to get through the next few months, maybe years. You know what? We're not looking for perfect company searchers. Brokers, you're going to love that. Same for you sellers and owners. We're not looking for perfect companies. We do not expect to buy the one-of-a-kind business. We simply want to own small and mid-sized businesses whose culture and worth ethic is profitability, their commitment to win. That's what you're fishing for when you're first talking to these owners. Now, what about customer orientation? Well, you can have employees committed to win, but they better be committed to customer satisfaction. So one of the things we're thinking about is, to what degree does the company prioritize and satisfy the needs and the wants of its customers? Oh, this also applies to the employees. To what extent is the employer, the company, satisfying the needs? You're reading the press. There are a whole lot of companies that are not looking too good in the way they're treating customers, the way they're treating employees. That's going to come to roost. Okay, let's cut to some questions, because that's really why we're here. I'm going to focus on the big picture. These are the strategic questions. These are the value drivers. These are the things that can diminish value. Remember, we don't want to talk about operations. We'll do that some other time. First of all, you got to assess the company's situation. What's its movement in its marketplace? Here's a big mistake. Don't just examine the written records. Examining the written records of business is a good way for buyers to turn their dream into their living nightmare. Savvy buyers, my clients tuned in, I'm talking to you right now. You better thoroughly interview people, including the owners, the customers, the suppliers, the employees, the landlords, and the sources of financing. The written records, oh, they're real nice. The interviews, that's where you're going to hear the truth. And the smartest buyers follow my advice. Their last question, which I'm telling you now, so you don't forget it, and I'll tell you later, just in case you might forget it. This is what you're asking brokers and owners and sellers. Is there any information that you have not disclosed to me that might have an adverse bearing on the viability or the value of the business for sale? You see, too many business buyers do not pose that question to everybody. Believe me, you may think, oh, sure they do. No, they don't. And worse, too many buyers who ask that question, they let the respondents get away with non-definitive answers. Business buyers who correctly ask that question at the right time are gifted by the respondents, the people who've just answered. They're gifted a roadmap for further inquiry. So not asking that question and verifying the response, hey, that's why so many dumb deals occur. Okay, here's a big question searchers and buyers need to start with. Is the company suitable for you? Now's not a time to unreasonably stretch your capability to buy and manage a business. You know, in the old days, which was just a few months ago, a lot of my clients did that. We really stretch. I'm telling them now, no. And here's the big question to ask sellers. Why is the company for sale? And of course, I say, why is it really for sale? So what has the owner been doing to prepare and then offer the company for sale? You need to ask that. Oh, are there any other buyers sniffing around? Have any buyers passed on the opportunity? You need to have the guts to ask owners that. You need to definitely have the guts to ask brokers that. And how well can the owner or the seller articulate what's been going on? And then how well can that owner show you bridges from what is to what can be? What's the business plan? I don't want to just see the thing they cooked up that they got on the internet, the template. We want to interview. What's the business plan? What about the financing? What about the cash flow? How are we going to fund the employees, particularly the benefit plans? These employees are going to want more when they come back. And what about policies and procedure manuals? Are there any? Well, let's see them. Let's talk about them. Remember, talk, T-A-L-K. What about employee handbooks? What about the job descriptions and procedures? Let's talk about it. Searchers, here's what I'm telling you. Walk away from unconvincing stories. But first, be realistic. Can you fill in the deficiencies after closing? Is it worth it to you to try? You know what you might want to ask owners? How about telling me how you prepared for this crisis, the pandemic? How have you prepared for the financial crisis? How about the recession we're in? Oh, and here's a big question I love to ask. You're asking the owner, hey, how did this business do in the last recession? You know, the Great Recession. They may give you some written records, interview, find out what happened. Because, hey, if they didn't somehow survive the Great Recession well enough and they've been struggling for the last 10 years, maybe you want to pass on that business. But you could say to the owner, how do you see your company pivoting to avoid the pitfalls and to seize the opportunity? Folks, there's a lot of opportunity out there, tons of it. Where is the next opportunity for the company? If an owner can't tell you that, why in the hell should you talk to them? Hey, you may say, well, owners, if they know where the next opportunity is, they'll stay with the company. No, they won't. If you own a small business right now, you are absolutely miserable. You're the walking dead. Unless you're in one of those favored businesses, those industries that are allowed to operate, you're viewing your future in business as over. So even if soon we get back to work, these owners, some of them are just emotionally too upset And that's why you can get wonderful companies that are poised for things. So we want to think about the costs, the revenue, opportunities for financial restructuring, new marketplaces, M&A. We want to think about all that. So guess what? I say to searchers, ask owners. If they're going to do it without you, they're going to do it anyway. But if they're motivated to sell, they'll tell you what they think about those things. Remember, if it's a BS story, just walk away. What exactly are the company's sustainable competitive advantages? Sustainable, that means getting through the next few weeks and months. Oh, what's the evidence? Again, that's where the interview comes in. What exactly is the competition posing, you ask the owner? How have competitors recently behaved? You're asking the owner that. Oh, and by the way, you're asking the owner and the brokers, who's been offered for sale and sold in the last month, 2 or 6, and failed to sell? And why was that? And on what terms? So go to bizbuysell.com, talk to the brokers, talk to advisors. What in the hell's been going on out there? Because guess what? The business you're looking at is alive, maybe, in the context of what's going on around it. Hey, this is a good one. What's the evidence that the company for sale actually exists? There are some businesses being offered out there that no longer have a legal standing. So you better find out right up front. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. Do they have good standing with legal and financial and other authorities? And if not, why not? Oh, for you turnaround people, this might be a good one. Hey, so what's the remedy? That's your question. Hey, what about the assets? What's the condition? And what's the proof to the title of the assets? Hey, if they were pledged for collateral, maybe they're not owned anymore, or maybe they're about to be liened or seized. And I'm not just talking physical assets, I'm talking intangible assets, like copyrights, trademarks, whatever. Searchers, look for weakening or deferred maintenance or poorly protecting of the assets. Remember, physical or intangible. Things that have suffered, maybe because of carelessness of the owner. Well, the owner's at home right now, not at work, perhaps. All these buildings are boarded up with small businesses. What's happening to those assets? How are they being safeguarded? Remember, these are questions you're asking. I'm not challenging you. These are questions you're asking owners and brokers. What about recurring revenue? Or what about one-off customer revenue? And what about customer turnover? And talk to us about your aging of accounts receivable. Hey, these businesses are closed. They may not be doing anything related to accounts receivable, even preparing bills, let alone trying to collect. And guess what? They're sending the bills and those are being ignored. What's the potential? You're asking owners, remember, what's the potential for returns, allowances, warranty claims? And what was it before this crisis? And what was it back during the Great Recession? How did you cope with these returns, allowances, warranties? Pay close attention to this. You're looking for the financial and emotional condition of the sellers and owners. You're trying to predict how they're going to feel as you're communicating with them. Are they absolutely done? Can they not cope with it anymore? Don't mistreat these folks. They're under a lot of pressure. Do not allow them to abort you because you are, excuse me, I can't think of a better word, behaving like an asshole. This is a time to be as nice as you can, even on lousy businesses or deals that are not going right, as nice as you can. Let's not add to the stress. But we need to foresee the future, and you need to be asking owners about it. You need to be asking the owners, and you need to be asking the employees, how do you feel? But I have a client who closed a deal a few weeks ago, and he brought in an HR professional way back during due diligence who reviewed the employees, and he's got that person involved. And she is watching the scene right now as employees are worried about getting sick, some not coming to work. She's watching carefully to see how can we keep the employees committed to the company. So you need to be asking owners about that. And if they say, oh, I don't know, well, then you better have the ability to handle that when you get control, assuming you get control. Now, what about the sources of financing? What's their emotional condition? Well, what's the emotional condition of the customers? What's the emotional condition of the supply chain? Oh, here's a good one. I have lots of friends who are landlords, big time commercial landlords, rich people. Guess what? They are pooping their pants. because they're not getting rent. Oh, and they're saying things to me like, well, I'll forgive May or April. Right. What's their emotional condition? Because when these landlords don't pay mortgages and foreclosure takes place, ask your lawyer what happens to leases in a bankruptcy filing. These contracts are up for negotiation, folks. Has the company been operating in compliance with the law? Is the company in jeopardy of what? Losing its insurance coverage? Or how about the scope of coverage? Oh, you may get insurance, but the scope's changing. Things like deductibles or higher premiums. Okay, let's pause. Searcher, remember, I'm doing this show mostly for searchers and buyers and advisors. I'm glad brokers, owners, and sellers are listening. You need to know how we behave, because if you don't know how we behave, you're just going to wreck your own deals. Searchers, listen up. Can you see right now that screening business opportunities merely with these big picture questions can and will give you a go or no-go decision? You can abort or you can continue with due diligence. So if the owners, by the time we get to right about now in these questions, are not answering, or the brokers are not helping you think it through, my feeling is abort. There are plenty of other brokers, there are plenty of other owners out there, and the more desperate they are, the more they're going to want to play ball with you. Again, don't take advantage. Okay, rolling back into the questions. What's the reliability of the disclosures made by brokers, owners, sellers when you searchers are asking questions? Can you rely on those disclosures? You better write them down, and later maybe your legal counsel will help you get them in reps and warranties. And what about the searchers? What are you going to do with what you're hearing from your interviews? Remember, interviews with employees, customers, suppliers. What are you going to do about that? How's that going to affect your purchase offer and your reps and warranties? How's that going to affect your transition assistance for the owner who stays along for a while? And by the way, during the transition, it's those same employees, customers, and suppliers. It'd be a pretty good idea to get a tip off of what it's going to be like to own the business right about now when you're asking about it before you make a purchase offer. This is probably after a letter of intent. Non-binding, of course. Oh, and hey, what about cyber risk? You need to ask, what is the cyber risk with this company? What's been the history? Hey, what's the reliability of your security technology? I mean, if you're reading the news, it's pretty crappy. People don't have state-of-the-art technology, and even the ones that do are getting hacked or it's failing. Hey, even Zoom stalls. Some of you will stumble and your voice won't come through, and we open for discussion. Why? Because the internet's full of kids playing games right now and everybody else watching movies or attending webinars. You need to ask, what are your crisis management plans? In fact, are you operating for one right now? Remember, we're talking about cyber risk. And here's a really big cyber risk. Ask owners, what is your third-party exposure? It's not just the company. Is there cyber risk insurance? You better look into that. And you better look into the conditions, because some of it's total BS. You get to pay the premium. Don't expect to ever get a claim honored. Now, how will the terms of employment contracts change? I'm talking about things in recruitment and turnover, compensation, benefits, termination. Remember, bankruptcy or threat of it can greatly affect these employment conditions. You've got to be careful getting into a snake pit, searchers, if this company is not handling their employees well. And you might just as well ask, what about recent pending or maybe potential liability claims or litigation? You're reading the news. Customers and employees are already suing companies. There are lawyers organizing class action lawsuits right now, and they're blaming the employers for infecting the employees with coronavirus. Well, they have. You better think about that. There's going to be a big increase in injury claims. You haven't seen anything yet. There's going to be a huge increase in unlawful terminations and lawsuits and complaints filed with government agencies and others relating to how the employment changed during the crisis, even this kumbaya period when the government says be nice to everyone. Well, if you're employees out there and you don't have any money because you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're going to be really pissed off. And these people are going to want to do something about it. So just bringing them back to work, that's not enough. So what I'm telling you, searchers, is you need to question this. You don't need to make this some negative conversation, but you need to be questioning it because it can kill the culture of a company, and that kills your investment. One of the lawyers who spoke at one of these events told me that in cyber risk, some of the problems don't arise. You don't even notice them for about 6 months. Well, I say it's the same thing. You buy a business, and there are a whole lot of things in the culture of that company that you didn't detect because you didn't interview people. You looked at written documents, and they're going to pop up and bite you in what? 6 months. One of the things you need to ask, have your contracts been weakened thanks to the pandemic or the financial crises? You know, these businesses that are now in the workout department of their sources of financing, how is that weakening their contracts? Environmental, you know, what have they been? People are not at work. Their businesses are boarded up. There are businesses with chemicals and other processes that are not being monitored. Somebody better pay attention to that. What about infection control? What about incidents? I just read something. It said, liabilities, typical run. I'm not playing lawyer here, lawyers. I'm just reading something legal counsel wrote. Environmental liabilities typically run with real property and potentially expose even innocent owners and innocent tenants to historical claims based on activities that may have occurred a long time ago, before the current seller who's trying to sell you his business even came on scene. So don't minimize this environmental stuff. Hey, how about negotiations to negotiate down the purchase price or the deferred debt? Ask the owner. Ask him that, or her. Or at least say to the owner, what have you done to negotiate down your debt or to defer payment? What exactly have you done, Mr. Seller, to negotiate it down so there's not as much debt? That just gives the seller more proceeds. Think about it. And here's a really big one. Lawyers love this one. It can be the basis of a no-go or go decision. How are we going to handle the material changes in the business from the time we make an offer, we sign, and escrow or closing is down the road? I'm talking about the material changes in the condition of the company or the industry or the economy that would cause a material adverse change in the business. You better, searchers, discuss this topic with legal counsel before you even begin searching. You need to understand this MAC clause and how to detect it early. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. Because guess what? You'll get to closing. You spend thousands of dollars for advisors, and you discover that when your counsel shows you the reasonable language that goes in this MAC, material adverse change provisions, that you won't want to do the deal without it, and the seller won't want to do the deal because of it. So learn about it before you search. So in early due diligence, you're trying to anticipate what's going to come up. Let's look at the black hole. You know, in astronomy, the black hole is the region of space-time where gravity is so strong that nothing can escape from it. Similarly, business buyers don't want to end up with a costly, inescapable problem. And this can happen when they buy the wrong business or they buy the right business the wrong way. Remember that last question. Is there any information, Mr. Owner or broker, that you've not disclosed to me that might have an adverse bearing on the viability or the value of the business for sale? And one more thing, and now we're going to open up for conversation. Here's a tip to help you validate the seller's responses to questions. This one is worth writing down. Spend lots of time on the premises of the company. Do it before you submit your offer to purchase it. Stay there as much as you can while you're going from a signed offer to closing. Eyes on the prize pays big time. You're going to see the emotional state and the operation. You're going to see the game in motion. All right. Anybody want to talk about anything?
Hi, Ted. Nancy here. I'll link it on the video also.
I see.
Hello. Hey, on the relationships that you mentioned, another thought is the relationship between the owners. And in a normal due diligence, you would be looking at the documentation of the ownership, the shareholder agreement or the LLC agreement. But just a little extra check in this environment is make sure that relationship is still intact. People are getting testy with each other. If it's a relationship that's been around for a while, it's probably okay. And if not, just check into that. And as a side note to that, there's a psychologist team in Chicago here that'll do a psychological evaluation on the owners of a company, or in the case that I saw, they were doing a presentation on whether you should bring an investor into your company. So it's not, maybe they do it on you as a buyer. But anyway, they look for narcissism and other abnormal psychological things to determine if someone is even a good partner. That's not really necessarily relevant here for you looking at sellers. But my point is that there are psychologists who do a psych due diligence on your sellers. And a quick note on the contracts, you said, check to make sure your contracts are still intact. They might have kick-out clauses that have already gone into effect, like defaults on loans or defaults on leases. So the contracts that you're counting on to be in place when you buy the business could have already been breached and not in place, or maybe not in place. So it's an extra careful check on those.
Okay. Well, I'm Ted Leverette at Partner On Call Network. If you haven't read my how-to books, do it. They will help you. Saying goodbye. Thanks for listening. Tune in every Wednesday between now and the end of May. We're done.